Hi everyone, I'm Côme Berbain, I'm the Chief Technology Officer of French State, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about public-private cooperation on innovation and how do we make digital transformation in France. I want to give you something really concrete. I want to basically tell you 3 stories on 3 different projects we recently achieved. And the first one is a question of secure messaging in the public sector. In France, we have different ministries, different silos. All of them have their technology solutions to discuss with them, but we lack something to discuss beyond all civil servants. All civil servants in France means 5 million people. Some of them are in the cities, some of them are in hospitals, some of them are in the ministries. And none of them are on the same big network or same information system. So today, we have mails, and that was absolutely all. So what happened is those people started to use those applications. WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, these things. And even our president, when he made his campaign, he was using heavily those applications. And at some points, we had some other countries trying to manipulate things. So we said, perhaps we need some of this application, but we need one of these applications we can trust. And in fact, it seems to be a very classical problem for states. You know, secure messaging, secure communications. We have military entities that do that for years. And we said, OK, let's do this. Let's do it the classical way. Let's make a procurement to some big companies that we have in France, like Thales or Atos. I love them, that's not a problem. But we know it will take 5 years and cost us 10 million. That's too long and it's too expensive. So we said, OK, let's think differently. And the bad thing with this 5 years and 10 million, probably we will forget the users at some point. It will be very secured, but not user-friendly at all. So we want to do it in a different way. And we created a new application. And we call this application CHAP, because France at least invented 3 centuries ago something which was the preliminary of messaging with semaphores. And the guy who made that, his name is CHAP. So we created an application we called CHAP. It's a mix between chat and a reference to Claude CHAP. We invented that. What we did, we said we want to have something which is open source. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. So what exists in terms of open source things to solve this problem? We found a protocol which is named Matrix. Very nice end-to-end encrypted messaging, does everything what we want today, perfect forward secrecy, blah, blah, blah. Great protocol. But we said, OK, we need to make some modifications to the product because it's not completely suitable for use by French state. So we found a company which is named NewVector, which deals with the Matrix protocol. And we basically made a deal with them. And we made a fork of their product. And we said everything that is specific to us, we publish on this GitHub account. And it will stay there. But everything that is not specific, every bug we correct, every security vulnerabilities we found, we put that on this GitHub account, and we also put that back into the original open source code. So that it's not just we're taking from the open source community, we're also giving it back what we are doing on the subject. So today, we have an iOS and an Android applications that works, that you can download on the App Store and the Google Store. The thing is, you need to be French civil servants to be able to create an account. And we have our own servers that works on public cloud in the procurements made by the French government on it. So it's our own servers. We're pretty sure there is no problem with the security, at least for what we know until now. And we did this project with our National Security Agency. And what we're seeing is also here we're pretty sure they did some good work, but you never know. There could be some vulnerability that we missed. So what we're in the process now of doing is we're starting a bug bounty. So that's, here again, we want to work with the private sector. Perhaps there are some guys, even if outside of France, even here in Estonia, they can find some vulnerabilities we haven't think about, and then it will help us to correct and increase the security of these applications. So just to give you a flavor, it looks like this. We also have a web interface. So you see it's really, you have your conversations, and you can send photos, and you can send just classic text. We're thinking about developing the voice and video, but we wanted to start small and start with small functionality. So from now on, we just have that. And that's the curve of accounts. We started the servers in March, and we didn't communicate on it at all. So all the first part here, it's just people in administration talking together, learning that these applications exist, and starting to using it. Then here we started communicating, and I checked the numbers this morning. We are, in fact, the next point is here, we have more than 20,000 users. And we have users, of course, from the IT departments, you know, the digital guys from the administration, but we start to see ambassadors using that. We start to see the guys that deals with the real estate of state. They start to use that. All the entities that makes huge interministerial discussions, they are starting to use these applications because there's a real lack on that. And so we hope it will be a great success. But here you see, that makes more digital transformation than to create some new big centralized service. We are empowering the civil servants, the public agents to speak by themselves, to work by themselves on all their, on whatever they are in the public service. So that's my first story. My second story is we have a real estate market in France, as every country, and we wanted to bring more transparency on that. How could you do that? We have a real estate that with increasing prices for years. Real estate is a big problem in France for people. And in fact, we look at what the administration knows and has. And in fact, when you buy a house, then the notarial guys, they send to the public finance, the tax system, they send some information about the amount, the size of the house, how many rooms they are, and so on. And we had that for years. And in fact, it's since 2006, we found that there are some values in this. But that, at the beginning, that values was dedicated only to states and local cities. Then after a few years, we said, OK, this could be also useful to have researchers access this data. Then we said, oh, perhaps real estate professional would like to access the data. And finally, this year, like months ago, we said, everyone needs to access the data. This data is collected by the tax system, and everyone is paying taxes. So everyone should be allowed to look at. And it's fair that not only the real estate agents have these informations on the prices, but everyone. So we put that on open data, on our open data platform, and we make some data protection agency in the process, and they made some constraints about we should not put at all any private information on the owner of the house, for example. But that was not that difficult to comply. And it looks like this. So you see your file, you have the date where you make the sell, you have the value, you have basically the address, and you have, is this an house or an apartment? What's the size, how many rooms you have in it? Do you have any special things? For example, here you have a pond. Don't ask me why, but you know that. And what's the surface of the ground around the house? And there are other things, but that's the main things. And if you look at this, to give that to citizens, it's crap. It's all data, but it's raw. You cannot do anything with that. And what happens is what I call let the private sector do the job. We had a company, the name is Meilleur Agent. It's a real estate agent company. And they did instantly that. But when I say instantly, they did that in 2 days. So this is some part of Paris. And all points here corresponds to one line of the file. And you can filter that. You can say, I want to know how much were sold an apartment in this street with 4 rooms or 2 rooms or whatever. And perhaps the public sector could have developed that. It would have cost us 6 months and a procurement method and blah, blah, blah. And it would have been long and costly. And here we just opened the data, and the private sector did the stuff. So finally, the missions that we put that in the end of the public is really done, but we only did half of the work, and it were cheaper and faster. And those are the first one, but we know that there are other guys that are working on it, trying to make a better user experience, a better way to search it into the data. So we probably not have only one solution, which would have been the case where if public sector would have developed it, we'll probably have 3 or 4, and the best will win. So that was my second story. My last story is when we talk about digital transformation of state, when we talk about e-governance, we always talk about public services, service directly done to the public. But states are doing something, another function, which is as important as public services, it's regulation. And I don't see a lot of works on how do we make the digital transformer regulation today. Of course, it's difficult, but what we did is we tried for 4 months to invent regulation of illegal content online, and we did that with Facebook. It started from a deal between our president and Mark Zuckerberg 6 months ago, no, 1 year ago, at the Tech for Good Summit. And Mark Zuckerberg come and say, the president, to say, we will have a problem with hate speech online, or with all those illegal contents. You probably will at some point make a regulation. We want to work with you in order that the regulation is directly digital native, and that we don't apply old regulation framework that we found today in media or in telecom, which is usually really paper-based, to something which is as dynamic as social networks. So what we did is we created a team from the French state with guys from the interior, the justice, the culture, the digital, the anti-hate units, and some regulators, our media regulator and our telecom regulator. And it's 10 people, and those 10 people discussed with Facebook for 4 months to how they work with this digital content, with hate speech online, what they do, whether they're working, how they're working, and what could be a possible regulation scheme. And clearly, we all grew up in the process. We learned a lot about how Facebook is doing it. We know it's not perfect. There are some views we don't agree with them, but we learned how they try to do that. And they learned what the regulation is. Facebook does not know what the regulation is. If you go and see a telecom operator, he knows what the regulation is. He's doing regulation for years. Media also. But in fact, Facebook does not really know what the regulation is, concretely. So we all grew up with that, and it gives us some ideas. We discussed those ideas with other social networks, because there is not only Facebook on the table. We discussed with Google, with Snapchat, with Twitter, with a company called Webedia, you probably never heard of, which is a French company which deals with social networks. And we also discussed with NGOs, with reporters, whistleblowers, for example, people like that, with researchers, and we tried to create something which would be a new way to regulate things. What does that mean, new way to regulate things? I give you a brief flavor because I could spend an hour on this topic. The first thing is we want to have a European regulation. If we start to have, if each country has its own regulation of hate speech, then it won't work. But the thing is, if you look at what we've done on RGPD, for example, we said one country will make the regulation for all others. It usually, for those platforms, it's usually Ireland that is chosen. But if you look at hate speech is, we don't have a common definition of hate speech at European level. German has some definitions, we have some, Estonian have some, because it's all linked to our past and culture. So if we say there's only one regulator here, won't work. So we need a network of regulators, but we need to have common rules. Otherwise, it's just 27 regulators. And we need a regulator which is not a classical regulator. The classical regulator is working in the name of the state and regulates a sector. And it's rarely discussed with the citizens. It's rarely discussed with the civil society. That's why we need to create. And that is, we try to summarize everything on a slide, which is quite difficult. But the idea is that this regulator has direct access to some of the system of Facebook, some API exchange, some ways to regulate on real time if it's available, some digital regulation. But in the same time, it has a role which is not only to make regulation, but also to inform, to explain what they're doing, how they can improve that, and to explain that to citizens, and to explain that to civil society, and to explain that to the politicians. Because today, politicians, when you listen to them, they just don't know anything on the subject. And it's normal. It's a very recent subject. So we all need to learn on that, and we need to do that together with a common regulator. So I stop here. You see, in the three cases, we try to take a real problem of the digital transformation and to deal with it not only just by the state is doing something, but doing it with the private sector, with the civil society, in order to find a common understanding and a common solution to that problem. Thank you very much.